video, so good morning. There is nothing you need to bring with you to be welcome here. No right beliefs, no proof of citizenship, no eternal optimism or clarity of conviction, no boundless courage or endless enterprise. You do not need to know what brought you here this morning, or how you will solve that problem that you're turning over and over and over in your mind today. You do not need to be already perfect or even halfway to belong to this circle where grace meets us where we are and does not leave us as it found us, where love resides in each of us, yet is somehow more than all of us, where life still pulses and rages and heals and transforms, creating us, and this day anew once again. Come, let's worship together. So our opening hymn is going to be offered to us by our FPC soul singers. So you all soul singers, come forward. You know who you are.
Like you'd like to join in with us, and please do it with gusto. This is for resistance, and that's a month's theme, so we're going to resist today.
But not singing. We're not going to resist singing. Right. Okay. So we'll start. Ready? 2, 3. We have come too far. We have turned around. We'll flood the streets with justice. We we are freedom bound. We have come too far, we can't turn around. We'll flood the streets with justice, we are freedom bound. We have come too far, we can't turn around. We'll flood the streets with justice, we are freedom bound. We have come too far, we can't turn around. We'll flood the streets with justice, we are freedom bound. We have come too far, we can't turn around. We'll flood the streets with justice, we are freedom bound. We have come too far, we can't turn around. We'll flood the streets with justice, we are can't turn around. We'll flood the streets with justice, we are can't turn around. We'll flood the streets with justice, we are can't turn around. We'll flood the streets with justice, we are can't turn around. We'll flood the streets with justice, we are can't turn around. We'll flood the streets with justice, we are freedom bound.
Woohoo! Amen. So please rise in body or spirit for our chalice lighting, and the Robertsons are going to light it for us.
Let this flame be to us a symbol of the wholeness we seek.
Its brightness dispelling gloom, lighting a path to faith and hope.
Its glow reminding us of the sacred bonds that link us to all living things.
Its radiance calling us to cast the light of freedom, justice, and peace upon all the world. Please be seated. Good morning. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, for this 1 hour, you are part of this congregation and you are welcome. So let's begin today by saying hello to one another. And again, the invitation is to find someone that you don't know quite as well as you would like to and say good morning. Let's mix it up for just a few minutes, and young people and old people, mix it up together.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello. Good
Hi.
to see you.
Not too many people here this morning, but
Oh, I know it. But I see you frequently, and I've often wanted to get to know you a bit better.
wow, me too. Me too. But good to see you.
I will say a quick good morning. This is Mark.
Okay, we will start making our way back. We'll make our way back. And I remind everybody that immediately following worship, we will have fellowship through these doors. If you are new to us, use a red cup for your coffee, and we will know that you're kind of new, and we will talk to you. So we're making our way back. You know, I think I've told you that our daughter Carolyn is now relocated to Savannah, Georgia, and she has been attending the UU church down there in Savannah. And right from the first, she has a 7-month-old and a 3-year-old. And right from the first Sunday, she said she's coming back and back and back and back because she really doesn't know many people in Savannah. And the church community is so friendly down there. So important to remember that you don't know who's entering our church and doesn't have maybe a circle of friends and or family nearby, and we can become that, we can take that role. So be friendly. Let's see, we now have our conversation with the children. I'm going to suggest that the young people kind of move into the first 2 pews here so they can see the video all together as a little group. So you all kind of relocate right here into these special pews over here. Donna, will you show them where we have reserved seating for our young people? Reserved seating. And we have a special video for you. And grown-ups, you can sit with your young people if you want to. Hi. I see goldfish. All righty. So take it away there, Dustin.
The Rabbit Listened by Corey Dorfeld. One day, Taylor decided to build something. Something new. Something special. Something amazing. Taylor was so proud. But then, out of nowhere, things came crashing down. The chicken was the first to notice. Cluck, cluck, what a shame. I'm so sorry this happened. Let's talk about it. Cluck, cluck. But Taylor didn't feel like talking, so the chicken left. Next came the bear. Garr, rawr, how horrible. I bet you feel so angry. Let's shout about it. Garr, rawr. But Taylor didn't feel like shouting, so the bear left. The elephant knew just what to do. Trumpa-da, I can fix this. We just need to remember exactly the way things were. But Taylor didn't feel like remembering, so the elephant also left. One by one they came. The hyena, let's laugh about it. The ostrich, gulp, let's hide and pretend nothing happened. The kangaroo, tisk tisk, what a mess, let's throw it all away. And the snake, shh, let's go knock down someone else's. But Taylor didn't feel like doing anything with anybody, so eventually they all left. Until Taylor was alone. In the quiet, Taylor didn't even notice the rabbit, but it moved closer and closer until Taylor could feel its warm body. Together they sat in silence until Taylor said, "Please stay with me." The rabbit listened. The rabbit listened as Taylor talked. The rabbit listened as Taylor shouted. The rabbit listened as Taylor remembered and laughed. The rabbit listened to Taylor's plans to hide, to throw everything away, to ruin things for someone else. through it all, the rabbit never left. And when the time was right, the rabbit listened to Taylor's plans to build again. "I can't wait," Taylor said. "It's gonna be amazing." The end. For CC, JB, SAF, and everyone rebuilding. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the book,
Did you
please
guys like
it.
that? Yeah, what was special about that story?
Nobody else listened except for the rabbit.
That's right. Nobody else listened.
And he's alone.
He was alone, but then the rabbit came and listened, right? Yeah. Anything else that was special about it?
It was good that the rabbit listened because if nobody listened, then he wouldn't be able to get out all his anger.
Wow, that's right. He had somebody listen, and that helped him Taylor get out all of his anger. Somebody listened. Yeah. Sometimes we think we have to fix things for people, but one of the most powerful things we can do is just listen. Cool. Any other thoughts about this story before we head you guys downstairs for something fun? We're going downstairs for something fun. So let's head these young people off. Have fun. So we're going to have announcements, but Dustin, let's leave the gallery view up because we're also going to have, after announcement, candles of joy and concern, and I'm going to start by seeing if anyone wants me to light a silent candle, okay? So we have a few announcements. You know who you are if you want to make an announcement today. And as Ted always says, it's ice cream season. Pretend the microphone is an ice cream cone.
Hello, I am Jim Hamilton. I am the chair of the Summer Fair, which is coming up. It's the Saturday before Father's Day in June. And you'll see as you go through that room there, that's it, why can't I remember that? That there are sign-up sheets for volunteers. So please look at those, see if there's an area you'd like to help at. But particularly, we're having a get-together, a potluck at Tracy Wagner's house on Thursday, May 11th. And all volunteers are welcome to come, learn a little bit more about the fair, and see if we can plot and figure out how to make this the most successful fair ever. You're on a run, too, in terms of weather.
Hi, I'm Carrie Meyer. I just want you to know that there is a table in the coffee hour place with letters that you can send to your legislator, asking them to support legislative agenda for Indigenous peoples. There's information there about the legislation, as well as handouts about the land acknowledgement and the life of the people that once lived here. Thank you.
I see that many of you are already aware of our basket for local food pantries. I'm delighted to see so many contributions already. We have 2 people in this church who work, at least 2, pretty exhaustively with local food pantries, and the list that I generated of preferred items came from those people, so we know these are the things that people would like to receive. There are copies of the list of things that we'd like you to donate in an envelope in this basket right over here. You can't miss it, it's pretty big. So please feel free. The list should be on the church's website under the Make a Difference page. But feel free to take a paper copy of the list if you prefer. Thank you very much.
So now we've come to the time for sharing our joys and concerns, what you've brought with you today, what's on your mind or in your heart. And for those of you in the church, as the Spirit moves you, I invite you to queue up in the center aisle. But I'm going to turn to our Zoom friends and ask, is there anyone who would like me to light a candle for them this morning? It's a silent candle. I'm happy to do that. Sherry, I'll light a candle for you. Anyone else? Okay, I will light a candle for Sherry. So if you all want to come up in the center aisle to light your candle as well. This morning's offering will now be given and received to continue the work of this beloved community of faith. This morning's reading is by the poet and author David Whyte. It's Whyte. I think some of you know him. Vulnerability is not a weakness, a passing indisposition of something we can arrange to do without. Vulnerability is not a choice. Vulnerability is the underlying, every present and abiding undercurrent of our natural state. To run from vulnerability is to run from the essence of our nature. The attempt to be invulnerable is the vain attempt to be something we are not. By refusing our vulnerability, we refuse the help needed at every turn of our existence. To have a temporary, isolated sense of power over all events and circumstances is one of the privileges and the prime conceits of being human, and especially of being youthfully human. But a privilege that must be surrendered with ill health, with accident, with the loss of loved ones who do not share our untouchable powers. Powers eventually and most emphatically, even we have to give up as we approach our final breath. The only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability, how we become larger and more courageous and more compassionate through our intimacy with disappearance and with loss. Here ends the reading. Let's see if you recognize this. A water bearer in India had 2 large pots, each one hanging on a pole, which he carried across his neck. One of the pots had a crack in it. The other pot was perfect and always delivered a full portion of water at the end of the long walk from the stream to the master's house. The cracked pot always arrived only half full. For 2 years, this went on every day, with the water bearer delivering only 1.5 pots full of water to his master's house. Of course, the perfect pot was proud of its accomplishments, perfect to the end. And the poor cracked pot was ashamed of its imperfection and miserable that it was able to accomplish only half of what it had been made to do. One day, that cracked pot spoke to the water bearer by the stream and said, "I am ashamed of myself, and I want to apologize to you." And the water bearer asked, "Why? What are you ashamed of?" And the pot replied, "For these past 2 years, I am able to deliver only half of my load, because this crack in my side causes water to leak out all the way back to your master's house. Because of my flaws, you don't get full value for your efforts." And the water bearer said to the cracked pot, "As we return to my master's house this time, I want you to notice the beautiful flowers all along the path." And as they went up the hill, the cracked pot did notice the sun was warming these beautiful wildflowers all along one side of the path, and this cheered him up somewhat. But at the end of the trail, it still felt bad because it had leaked out half of its load. And then the water bearer said to the pot, "Did you notice that there were flowers only on your side of the path, but not on the other pot's side? That's because I have always known about your flaw, and I took advantage of it. I planted flower seeds on your side of the path, and every day while we would walk back from the stream, you have watered them. For 2 years, I've been able to pick these beautiful flowers to decorate my master's table. Without you being just the way you are, he would not have this beauty to grace his home." Well, my spiritual friends, I have told you this story about the cracked pot at many, many of our ingatherings over my 19 years with you. I don't know whether you've ever noticed it or not, but every ingathering, in some way or another, I give us all permission to be less than perfect. Being human is all about being less than perfect. I always go back to the ancient story of creation that says, on the 7th day, the Creator God looks around at all creation and pronounces it good, very good, but not perfect. Everyone is vulnerable, no matter how much they try to avoid it. We are all born vulnerable. Think about it. You came into this world. Nobody did not come into this world as anything but a little tiny infant, depending on everybody else for life. Vulnerability is accepted and even celebrated in many cultures around the world. In some cultures, vulnerability is seen as a sign of emotional strength and resilience, not weakness. For example, in the Japanese culture, there's this concept called wabi-sabi, and that embraces imperfection, impermanence, and the beauty of things that are imperfect and not quite complete. This concept values vulnerability as a way of showing authenticity and honesty. And it's a worldview that values naturalness and humility. And that's a worldview that appreciates the beauty of things that are rustic and weathered and a little bit old. Elderly people have a very special place in the Japanese culture. But did we grow up believing in vulnerability, that that was a good thing in the United States, in our culture? We rather have an emphasis on independence and self-reliance and success. And this can make it difficult for people to admit their vulnerabilities. Folks fear being perceived as weak or incapable. And it is true that one of our brain's many jobs is to protect us. Our brain kind of creates a story or a narrative that we need to hear about our well-being and the world around us. And the story we perceive when we're in danger is that vulnerability is not a good thing. So the conclusion we draw is that vulnerability itself is awful and should be avoided at all costs. But my spiritual friends, contrary to what our brains may be telling us at times, to be vulnerable is to be human. In order for us to exert the kind of influence we hope to have in our lives, courage, creativity, connectivity, connection, leadership, spirituality, all of these things require that we embrace vulnerability. One of my favorite writers on the topic of vulnerability is a woman named Brené Brown. Some of you may remember her work. And she says, vulnerability is the core, the heart, the center of meaningful human experience. Vulnerability is the core, the heart, the center of meaningful human experience. She's kind of dedicated her life to disproving our commonly held misbeliefs about vulnerability. This is very interesting. Her years of research, scientific research, actually show that vulnerability is the most accurate scientific measure of courage. Vulnerability is the most accurate scientific measure of courage. Are you surprised about that? It's been about a dozen years since Brené Brown put the word vulnerability in the common lexicon. She got there by studying shame, and after looking at hundreds of interviews and focus groups, she came to the conclusion that those with a strong sense of belonging to a greater community, kind of like what we have here, all had one thing in common. They made choices often to be vulnerable. Dr. Brown went on to write a book entitled Daring Greatly. Subtext, how the courage to be vulnerable transforms the way we live and love and parent and lead. So according to Brené Brown, vulnerability is not a weakness, but rather the courage to show up and be seen, even when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability involves acknowledging and accepting our limitations, our imperfections, our weaknesses, being willing to share them with others. According to Dr. Brown, vulnerability is not a weakness, but a strength. It takes courage and resilience to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, especially when we fear rejection, criticism, or judgment from others. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, my friends, we learn to accept and love ourselves for who we are, warts and all. This helps us develop a more positive and a self-compassionate self-image, and it helps us judge others less so than we might. So, my friends, how can we practice being vulnerable? Well, unfortunately, the main thing you have to do to embrace your vulnerability is embrace discomfort. Vulnerability involves taking emotional risks, stepping outside our comfort zone. We can start by identifying areas where we're feeling stuck or uncomfortable and intentionally pushing ourselves out to take a risk, like being very happy in a parish ministry and intentionally leaving and starting up in law in another state in the South. Just saying. Vulnerability asks us to try new things and take chances, even if we're not sure of the outcome. And as vulnerability asks us to step out into the unknown, it also invites us to be kind and compassionate with ourselves and to navigate the ups and downs of life that always come along. In a society that often places a high value on strength and independence and self-sufficiency, it can be difficult to admit that sometimes we need help or support. And asking for help is a vulnerable act that requires us to acknowledge our limitations. We can practice vulnerability by asking for help when we need it and accepting support from others without judgment or shame. I kind of got over judgment a while ago when I found this great speech by Teddy Roosevelt. And every time I'm in a position of getting a little afraid of being judged, I return to this speech, and I share it with you today. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who makes mistakes, who comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Those who spend himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows that in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst knows failure, but at least has failed while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. My spiritual friends, that for me is what vulnerability is all about, daring greatly. Beloveds, it's not the critic who counts. It's not the person who lives his or her life on the sidelines, who views the deeds of others from what I call the cheap seats in life. What are the cheap seats? Those are the seats for those cold and timid souls who sit back and criticize others who dare to live a brave life. Those in the cheap seats aren't willing to risk getting knocked down or being faced with the daunting task of getting back up. And this includes risks related to love, to parenting, to leadership, to creativity. It's easy to make a full-time career of hurling judgment and criticism and shame at others, but it is very hard to live a life of true courage, to get rid of the armor that we wear to protect ourselves, the armors of perfectionism, people-pleasing. Vulnerability asks us to put down our armor and take risks. It means letting go of our fears of being judged or rejected and trusting that we will in the end be loved and accepted for who we truly are. There's two more things I want to say about vulnerability this morning. And the first, my friends, is that in a culture that places an extremely high value on nearly unattainable perfection and control, there is nothing like a global pandemic to show us that we really don't have it all together, no matter how much we thought we did. Is there? The COVID pandemic taught us a lot about vulnerability. It showed us that vulnerability is an inherent part of the human condition. I remember it was my 16th year of ministry, and I thought, well, I really know how to do this parish ministry thing. And then from one week to the next, we were not in the church, we were on Zoom, and the entire life of the community was remote. And I said, well, man, I do not know how to do this. Did I feel vulnerable? The pandemic showed us that vulnerability is really an inherent part of the human condition. No one was immune to the effects of the pandemic, and everyone was impacted in some way. The pandemic also showed us that by supporting and helping each other, we can all get through difficult times together. The pandemic taught us that vulnerability can lead us to innovation and adaptation. Whoever thought of a TV set on a plywood platform, for example? In the face of unprecedented challenges, individuals and communities had to come up with creative solutions to problems they never even anticipated. The other thing I'd like to say about vulnerability is this. Growing older is a great spiritual teacher on so many levels, and one of the greatest lessons on aging is vulnerability. Some of us are experiencing that at this very moment. So, my friends, I'd like to end with this wonderful poem, a poem that I've always loved about vulnerability. It's called The Invitation. It's by Oriah Mountain Dreamer. And it goes like this. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dreams, for the adventure of being alive. And my friends, my prayer for you is, number one, that when you gather together next September, you remember that you're all cracked pots and allow yourself the freedom to be imperfect and the transition to be imperfect and your new minister to be imperfect. And in life, may you remember, when you come across that challenge, you're on the edge of the cliff. Breathe deeply, pause before you act, and then take in another deep breath, and poised on the edge, risk jumping in. May that be true for you. Amen. So I now invite you to rise in body or spirit. Our last hymn is in your gray hymnal, number 128. Please rise. When you come to the edge of the cliff, breathe deeply and pause before you act, and then take in another deep breath, and poised at the edge, risk jumping in. Until we meet again, may you be blessed. Now go be a blessing to the world, and coffee hours right through these doors. Oh, and thanks so much to the Voses for this beautiful display here honoring Rachel Carson for Earth Day. Take a peek at the books and the flowers. Beautiful.